faces, which is fantastic. So thank you for coming, and some returning ones as well, which is great. The whole point of this skill exchange, which was actually a year ago, well, not today, last month, when in fact the very first skill exchange came about. So it's our first anniversary, so there'll be cake later, which is exciting. You can't have a birthday without cake, can you? Came about because I'd moved back down to the Isle of Wight, and there wasn't opportunities that were convenient for me in the evenings to network. So I felt it was perhaps an opportunity for people who either work full time or, you know, have unsociable hours. Hello, hi. There's a seat somewhere. Was to create an event for networking, but also to learn as well. So I love learning, and to invite people along, like Jackie, who I also have the pleasure of working with. I work with Jackie at the National Museum of the Royal Navy as well, who works in PR. So obviously Jackie's here tonight to talk about PR, and then afterwards I'll be talking about SEO and kind of trends for the year ahead as well. So without further ado, I will move over for Jackie.
Okay, so thank you so much for the invitation this evening. My name's Jackie Shaw. As Callum says, I'm currently the PR manager for the National Museum of the Royal Navy. We're based in Portsmouth Historic Dockyard, but actually we have museums nationwide in Hartlepool, Belfast, Jovelton and Gosport, as well as Portsmouth. Just a few bits and bobs about the National Museum. We're the 35th largest navy in the world by displacement. We welcome 1.3 million visitors a year. That makes us the 5th largest attraction outside of London last year. This year we celebrate our 10th anniversary, and we're probably the youngest museum, national museum in the country, but we are a museum in a hurry, and actually that has had a big impact on my job as PR manager, because we've undertaken very extensive merger programs with 4 service museums: the Royal Marines, the Fleet Air Arm, the Submarine Service, and the Surface Fleet in the Historic Dockyard. So that's been quite a difficult internal comms activity. We've had unhappy staff, we've had disgruntled stakeholders, so it's certainly been a bit of a bumpy ride. I've worked in the industry for over 25 years. I've worked in-house, agency, I've run my own consultancy as well. But I'm particularly proud of my campaign to open the Mary Rose Museum in 2013, that I led the marketing and PR for that. We reached 2.5 billion people worldwide, and had about 70 media. I'm hoping this works. Very, very, very short clip of don't click. Press. What am I pressing now?
Oh no, it's gone back. There we go. No.
It's always tech. Callum knows I'm not very good with tech, but we had live into the news and a big kabuki drop, which was a big, as you can see, Duncan Kennedy broadcasting live into News 24, had a big kabuki which was about 30 metres, and then he unveiled the wreck of the Mary Rose. So how do I come out of that? Exit, escape, yeah.
And then if you just
Exit. And that one. Excellent. Everyone needs a Callum, by the way. So that was a great campaign, but I've also led the communications, thank you, for a big public inquiry that actually got questions asked in Parliament, worked with the National Trust, the D-Day story, and got a book serialised on Radio 4's Today programme, which was a particular thing for me. But what does that all mean? As a relatively poor museum, PR actually plays a really important role in what we're doing, establishing a national profile. I am the only PR practitioner in the museum, but I do use a consumer PR agency as well. But it's a full-on job working solo at the moment, particularly because we're custodians of really famous heritage assets like HMS Victory, and we have to attract visitors as well. Also, I'm a self-appointed internal communications champion because I believe telling great stories actually engages your staff and your volunteers and your colleagues. It makes them proud to work for an organisation, and also I hate colleagues finding out about things in the local newspaper. So tonight I thought I'd take advantage of this evening's session briefly to talk about why I think PR is still very important, give you some useful tips about writing media releases and working with the media, and highlight some of the pitfalls that we face working in a really fast-paced and outward-facing industry. I'd also love to hear about some of the challenges you guys face on the island. I do a bit of work with the island media, probably not as much as I should, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. There was a recent episode on Radio 4's media show called The Art of Public Relations. It caused a bit of consternation in the industry because it was talking about PR people being bullies and liars. It was also focusing on the sort of more glamorous celebrity PR and crisis communications. And I feel a lot of people think that's what PR is. They think of it as being, you know, young blonde girls in London fannying around with a press release, if you've ever seen Bridget Jones. There's a really famous art presenter called Waldemar Januszczak, and he always features photographs of young press officers in front of magnificent masterpieces, and they're always young. And I said to him once, you know, can I be featured in that? And he just turned around and said, no, you're too old. Anyway, but so that's the sort of the glamorous side, but actually PR works in any organisation, whatever service that you do. So why PR? Well, it's what we now call earned media, and that's basically third-party endorsement. It can be harnessed literally by any organisation, whatever your product or service. It's essentially free. It's a salary cost. You get the odd add-on like photography or a media monitoring system if you're lucky enough to have that, although Google Alerts are free and they're pretty good as well. And once you've written a story or content, it can be used across many channels. I'm going to talk a lot about content tonight, and I make no apology for saying my 3 watchwords are content. And you can work across websites, digital, social channels this way. But my 4 main rules are: keep it simple, stupid, key messages matter, speed and accuracy, and know your audiences. So any PR campaign starts with what do we want to say and to whom. And so, as I say, my mantra is keep it simple, stupid. I read an amazing statistic the other day. If you think about a political soundbite, you know, strong and stable, as maybe one of the sort of key, one of the key uses of a key message. I think last night, how many times did Theresa May say in the national interest when she was giving her press conference? If we use political soundbite as the key way of using a message, the average length of a political soundbite in broadcast in 1968 was 43 seconds. It went down to 9 seconds in 1998, and it's now 7 seconds. So they've got 7 seconds to get across their key message. Donald Trump, love him or loathe him, uses 240 characters. That's all to try and explain complicated political rhetoric to 57 million people. So key messages, keep it simple. When I started out in PR in the late 80s, we had coloured transparencies that we sent to magazines and newspapers when they wanted an image. We sent them in the post, They took 3 days to arrive, and if we were lucky, they sent them back. Jump forward to the early 2000s when I returned from a career break after having children, and everything was JPEGs and TIFFs and at the speed of an internet connection. It might be interesting to consider how this pace of response affects us as creatives, marketing and digital professionals, and the work that we do. We are constantly on deadline. We have to make really snap decisions. We have to respond very quickly. And that puts an incredible amount of pressure on people. So the real discipline about thinking about PR is to determine who your audiences are, or publics. That's where the definition comes with, and how you build your relationships with them. Many people think PR means press relations. That is an iteration of it, but it really does mean media is only one of your publics. Anyone like to suggest here who else might be a public to you if you run a business, or or you do PR or marketing? What sort of people should we be thinking about when we're communicating? Customers, yeah. I mean, for us, so that's visitors, that's people who are buying tickets on the website. They can be families, they can be adults or seniors, people with children, people with a real interest, in our case, in naval history. But other publics are also some people, stakeholders, like it might be the local councillor. You might need to convince that he or she that your scheme, your proposal is really important. It might be a potential donor. So think about how you can segment your audiences and communicate specifically to them, and putting them into bite size, it makes it much, much easier. Interestingly, today I was recording a podcast about D-Day with 2 naval historians. Perfect for what we call our Navy Pride audience. And we talk, Callum and I were literally saying perfect for Navy Pride, and that's how we talk in the office. So we've got a very clear idea of what that person looks like, what interests them, and what's going to get them engaged. When that audience then distribute, comment, quote your content, that's when you've achieved the holy grail, what we call third-party endorsement in PR, letting somebody else say how good you are, or how you should go to this event, or you should visit this place, or you should use this service. But let's just talk about media for a moment, because that's what I'm going to mainly focus on this evening. So media endorsement, i.e. media coverage, is a key tactic for any PR campaign. I'm really pleased Lynn's here tonight, because she's going to help me with my next point. I want to put things into context. I'm reading a really good book at the moment by the former Guardian editor, Alan Rusbridger. It's about the changing face of news over the last 20 years. And the pace of change has been phenomenal. News is 24/7, and everyone is a citizen journalist. Here's Lynn. She's going to record that video. She's going to post it up on social media.
It'll go up onto YouTube and then out to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, everything.
Scary. I mean, in the old days, you had a journalist sitting at a desk who wrote a story. You read picked the paper up in the morning, and that was it. So this is what we're up against. I mean that very nicely, but this sort of demand is what we're up against. Many organisations now have many more social media followers than local or regional newspapers have readers. 40 papers closed in 2017. National figures, hopefully you can read that. These are the latest circulation figures for our national newspapers. In the old days, the Sun used to be 4 million. The News of the World on a Sunday was 4 million. Look at those, look. The Daily Star, but the Daily Telegraph, considered one of our leading broadsheets.
I can't see the
370,000 readers. There are many, many brands now that have many, many more followers than that. These papers recognise the real importance of driving to online and the advertising revenue that they can get that way. Locals and regionals are really fiercely criticised about the standards of their websites, but in reality it's probably a ruse to force people to hashtag buy a paper. And that is a brand new campaign that locals and regionals are getting behind. Many of you might know that the Portsmouth News, the parent company, went into administration about 6 to 8 weeks ago. They were bought out, but people are just not buying papers. The Portsmouth News, and forgive me, I will talk about Isle of Wight. Portsmouth News, just shy of 15,000 readers daily now. We've got way more followers than that on social media, haven't we? The most recent I can find for the Isle of Wight County Press is 23,000. So we're all publishers with potential to reach as big, if not bigger, an engaged audience. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't work with media partners. They're still hungry. People trust papers, despite some of the headlines that you see. They particularly trust local newspapers. So it's really important to work with them. But sponsored copy or advertorial is a really good way to work with media partners. But I would say 2 things. Be transparent that it's paid for copy, and respect the media. You know, they've got a reputation and a brand to uphold, so don't ask the impossible. I talked earlier, we said journalism is now content, and we're constantly asking, how are we going to monetize this content? How are we going to make money out of this? Now, I evaluate our PR content through something called AVE. It's Advertising Value Equivalent. It's a very old-fashioned tool, but it's basically how much you would pay in a newspaper, on a radio station, if you were buying that space, and that's how I evaluate. This last year, I achieved about the equivalent of £15 million in media coverage. So that's £15 million we didn't have to pay for, because I don't earn that much. Do I, Callum?
I don't know, Jackie.
Maybe I do. So AVE does have some flaws, but you can look at reach, you can look at tone, you can look at sentiment. These are all possible if you have a media monitoring system, but that can be quite expensive, maybe up to £10,000 a year, and may not be appropriate for everyone. So it's what we call the revenue versus reach argument. How many people are we reaching? How much are we spending to reach them? And it's one I constantly have. A colleague told me the other day that PR doesn't generate revenue for the museum. Interestingly, in our visitor surveys, the most highly rated part of it is they visited because they watched a TV programme, or they read something in the paper, or they heard something on the radio. So I said to him, go figure. But what is more important, revenue or reach? There's a wonderful Twitter account at the moment by the Museum of English Rural Life, MERL. I recommend you look at it. And they're held up as a superb way of creating content to engage people. Interestingly though, their visitor numbers are not increasing. Their online presence is huge, they get retweeted all the time. So what's the notion of success there? I don't know, I would say engagement, but others might say, well, we're not getting visitors. So third-party endorsement, what is it? It's when someone not associated with your brand mentions you on social media, online, offline publication, or blogs about you. This is why we call it earned media, because you've earned it. And that's the desired result of any business's PR and social media efforts. It includes media coverage, blog mentions, social media posts or tweets. product reviews, any forum dialogue with online communities. So for decades, businesses have used PR to reach out to the media, and we do this through storytelling. So the goal is to encourage publications, radio companies, local TV to write stories about your businesses, your news, your brand, so you can reach their target audience and increase your credibility. What's included with media? This is not a definitive list, but it's the local regional outlets, that's print, broadcast and online, the national papers, print, online, consumer. The One Show has 8 million viewers. It's considered the holy grail for getting stories on. Interestingly, I had a debate recently. We had got somebody to agree to do a 1 hour long documentary on a project that we're doing, or we got the One Show. Which one do you think was the most popular? The One Show. Because a 1 hour documentary, yeah, great, it'll go on TV, but it might only actually get 600,000 views, whereas the One Show gets 8 million every evening. Interesting. Trade and specialists, so you know there are magazines that I'm sure whatever business you're in you get into, blogs and forums, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I do want to just mention deadlines. So for example, my heart sinks when someone comes in and says, oh, can you do a media release on this event? And I say, oh, when is it? Oh, next week. And you think, oh, well, what's that going to do? I was in conversation with Radio 4 not so long ago. They're working 18 months in advance. So plan what you're going to do. The media landscape is shifting from offline to online, and more consumers are interacting on social media. So understanding how you can use that is even more important. And I think most businesses now recognise the value in creating interesting, engaging, relevant content. However, there's no point in creating that content if you don't reach your target audience. So you really need to think about how you're going to distribute and what we call amplify that content. It's a dreadful word, but I use it daily. How are we going to amplify this? What sort of channels are we going to use? If you're tweeting, Facebooking, Instagramming, press clippings that you've got, or radio coverage that you've got, just tread carefully though, because there's two bodies called the Copyright License Association and the Newspaper Licensing Association. If you think that the written word belongs to a journalist, it's really important that you don't just recreate that in a tweet or photograph the article or something like that, because you actually going against their rules and their copyright and all of that. So just tread carefully. So with storytellers, find the story that is interesting within your business. It might be a new product, it might be a new member of staff, it might be a milestone, you might be having a 10th anniversary, or you've just reached your first £1 million, and draft a media pitch, what we call a media pitch, an idea, and talk to the media about it. Another tactic is to create content about that and use that through your social networks as well. That can sometimes work for you, often work for you, sometimes it goes against you. Again, only today we've been talking about the new Gillette campaign. And I don't know if any of you have seen that. They've had a new advert about male toxicity, for want of a better word, and it's really generated a lot of hullabaloo. Was it 40,000 comments they had to delete from their YouTube channel? You know, so I mean that's on a huge scale, and I accept that. But you know, there's an engaged audience there if you can get the story out. So 3 watchwords: content, 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 and then you create it and you can use it anywhere. In fact, companies are still doing a lot of advertising, paying for adverts and other sort of promotions like that. But studies show that 92% of consumers trust word of mouth recommendations, that third party endorsement, whereas only 24% trust online ads. Sorry, Callum. So it really shows how effective that PR can be. Is the media release dead? Absolutely not, but I'm going to share some fundamental advice with you that I've learnt over the years. I'm happy to be told it's rubbish. Know your media, research the journalists, read the local paper, read the magazines, follow them on social media. They're all on Twitter, they're all on Instagram. Get a really good sense of what their sort of story is. Is there an obvious place in the paper? You might read an article or something, an interview, and think, actually, I could be featured with that. Approach them, offer yourself. You know, they're always keen to fill space. Or you listen to the radio, or you read their website, something like that. But the biggest complaint from journalists is, have you ever read the paper, or watched the show, or heard the programme? Because this just doesn't fit with our offer. Don't be afraid to pitch. You know, email is a great way to reach out to journalists, but keep it really simple. Email them. If they say no, don't worry about it. Maybe another journalist might be interested, or you need to rethink what you're doing. Don't blanket pitch. If you've suddenly got a new product or a great local news story, don't email everybody saying, oh, I can talk to you about this, I've got an exclusive, because it doesn't become an exclusive then, and it annoys journalists as well. So I'll say to you, are you talking to anyone else about this? It's a really crowded market, and journalists are very sensitive about their work. Last week I was working with what they call a news agency. So that's an agency that writes stories and then issues them to nationals and regional papers. The regionals buy the service and they issue it. But it was on a piece, and they asked me if I was doing anything with it, and I said no. It was for them, and once it's published, we'll amplify on our social media, but only after publication. And by being honest like that, they'll come back to me. Avoid ringing, emailing, saying, have you received my press release? Have you received my pitch? They hate it. It irritates journalists. But if they do use your story, even if it's only very small, follow up with a thank you and mention something else that is coming up that might interest them. Ask yourself, would I read this in a newspaper? Would I hear it on a radio? Think about the type of language you read and hear. Avoid superlatives. You are not the greatest company, and neither are you unique. I hate to break it to you. However, your product might actually be a national first. It might create a service or fill a product need that no one else has ever thought about. And don't write the word you in press releases, media releases. It's not advertising copy. Gain trust from a journalist, and they'll use you more and more. Many people think journalists are Satan. They think they're lazy, and they just like people like me to do their work. There's an element of that. They're not Satan, but they're incredibly under-resourced. I'll use the Portsmouth News as an example. You know, the team there used to be 3-4 times what it is now. So there's a really small team that are working incredibly hard. That makes my life a little bit easier because I can get stories placed, but that's only because they trust me. They'll use my words. So that's great. I don't do coffee mornings, meetings, I don't do lunches, but when I do meet with a journalist, I get to know them, I get to know interests them. Maybe they might have a personal interest that is the same as us, and I follow them on Twitter, and I might comment on stories sometimes and say that's really good. But I always say what's coming up. Oh, this thing might interest you, and they do remember, and they come back, and they'll think, yeah, that's fine. If you get an inquiry, respond quickly. If you don't know the answer, don't give an answer. Ask what their deadline. Deadlines are very different now. Daily print still tends to be late afternoon, but websites are constant and need refreshed copy all the time. And online, just because it isn't printed in the newspaper doesn't mean that it's not important. The Mail Online and the Guardian websites are two of the probably top 5 websites in the world. They reach 200 to 300 million people daily. In the opening paragraph of the media release, who, what, why, where and who, always remember that, first or second paragraph, and include all relevant information. Bullet points are fine, let the journalists put their own style onto it. And remember, tabloids and local papers write for an average 11-year-old, national broadsheets for a 14-year-old. So keep it simple, keep your style neutral, and like a school essay, the opening paragraph is the hardest. Edit from the bottom, you can cut paragraphs at the bottom, make sure it makes sense in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, and put editor notes at the end if you just want to tell about the background to your company or background to the project. And my last one is use of images. Some journalists like them embedded in the email, some like a low-res image attached. Do not send 20 megabyte images to the newspaper. I once crashed the Portsmouth News website years and years ago by sending too big email system too big an image. And with radio stations, they only ever accept very small files because they generally don't use images, although they are using them more and more on their websites and social feeds, but they can be low resolution images. Sorry, I've galloped through that, but I hope it made some sense. And if you've got any questions, I think there will be an opportunity.
We've got time for 2 questions, if anyone has any.
Not a question, but a thing on Twitter. Do you ever use journo request?
I'll be honest with you, I don't, because it shows my hand to other people who are using journo requests, and I tend to, I'll ask a journalist to follow me, or if they quite often do follow, and I will DM them.
Right, yes.
Some people do, some journalists do, and I would always, if there's something, I would respond to it, definitely.
So I don't know if you, are you all on Twitter? That's a hashtag journo request, and they might be putting out, looking for a particular story.
Yeah, it tends to be very consumer, so it might be, I don't know, your house, has your house ever burnt down?
Right, yes.
You know, and you've lost it. In fact, recently, a storage park burnt down and people lost all their belongings, and there was a journo request, has this ever happened to you? That
Yes,
sort of thing.
so they are, yes, of course, probably more than business related.
Yes, yeah.
Anything else? Anyone got any other questions about social media use or ideas? If you've got any ideas you'd like to perhaps discuss? Or...
Well, I've put my contact details there, so if you want to email me or follow me on Twitter or something, I'm addicted to Twitter. I don't do as much tweeting as I should now, but do follow me and ask any questions.
And obviously I'll send the slides around after the evening as well. So thank you very much, Jackie.
I'll sit down.
Callum, do you have the Wi-Fi code?
Do I have the Wi-Fi code?
Yes, you do.
Do I have the Wi-Fi code? Not to hand, I'm
No,
sorry.
it says there's free Wi-Fi, but not
Okay, I'm sorry. Right, okay. So... I'm going to try and get through this really quick because I want there to be some networking time at the end. Who's new to SEO? Who's never heard of search engine optimization before? Just trying to gauge the experience of the room. Okay. In terms of like your experience with SEO, so is everyone fairly kind of quite early in terms of their understanding? Okay. So got to start somewhere, haven't you? And with SEO, it can seem a bit daunting because it often depends on how much time you can give SEO. You know, you can give it 3 hours a week, you give it a day a week, but obviously it's got to work with what you do and your needs. So what I've done today, I've put together the kind of top 10 SEO tips for 2019. So some of those tips.
Sorry. Can I just say, so did you say why? Just wondering why the tips change year by year.
They don't. A lot of them don't change year by year, and in fact, some of these were recommendations in 2018. 2019 is more kind of just looking ahead at some trends. Perhaps there were things that happened at the end of 2018, or there are blogs out there that I would always recommend you subscribe to, like Moz or HubSpot, and they're obviously people who do it day in, day out, who will make predictions. They won't always come true, but it's always good to have because no one has a real crystal ball to do that. Okay, so top tip number 1, especially if you're first starting out with SEO. So you could be in the middle of a website build, you could be at the end, you might have had a website for many years. It's always really important going into search engine optimization with an action plan. So what does that look like? Like I said, it depends where you are at online. So like I said, you could be at the beginning, you could be at the end of a website build. With SEO, you always need to work out your priorities. So your priority could be, right, I want to get as many people to my website as possible, or I need to get 100 people to buy tickets for an event, or I need 50 people to sign up for a white paper. There's always some form of action. So make sure you have that priority on what you require to form part of your action plan. So make sure you have this overarching need. Jackie touched upon knowing your audiences. So we Navy Pride is one of our audiences, but it's identifying different audiences your product appeals to. So obviously, a clubbing holiday in Ibiza might not necessarily appeal to someone in their late 70s. Do you know what I mean? But a holiday in Ibiza on the island that is away from the resort might. So it's making sure that you understand your audience and your product as well. You might have a product that reaches a wide audience, so perhaps think about breaking that down into age group. It could be it's not always clear cut, but male and female, or occupation. Select the content based on your audience profile. So, for example, many years ago, I worked for a data center distributor full-time as a marketing manager. So it was very B2B, and a lot of what we did was downloading white papers or signing up to receive a manual, and then one of the sales team would follow that up with a call. So just make sure that you're selecting the type of content based on your audience. So, I use the Ibiza reference. It could be a discount book of vouchers for attractions in Ibiza. So it's making sure you understand your audience well. I will send these out afterwards. I've put hyperlinks in this to really good resources. HubSpot has a really good how to create an SEO strategy. It's very basic, but it does require you to sign up, but it's completely free. You can always unsubscribe from their marketing platforms. And there's free templates as well. So it's very like an Excel document, but it's all very laid out. Top tip number 2. So, okay, you've got your website, you've built your website, or perhaps you haven't, and you're planning to. Making sure you've got the basics done right is the most important thing. Metadata is still relevant, it's still required, but its emphasis Google places on it has gone down in recent years. But it's still important that you have a clear call to action, that you're using keywords, which I'll mention and talk about in a moment, and it makes sense. as well. So obviously we need it. Now, what is metadata? Metadata is meta description. When you're on Google, you're typing in hotels on the Isle of Wight, you'll see your meta description, it'll be the bit of text, and then you'll have a meta title normally above that, which will give you the title of the page, and often the brand as well. So, it could be, use the Ibiza reference again, it could be Ibiza Holidays UK, that could be the title. Then you could be, providing holidays to Ibiza since 1996. And the description could be their homepage, and they could be talking about the services and products they offer. So make sure when you choose your keyword, so you've identified a page you want to update, so it could be a service that you offer, so it could be a product. Make sure you choose the right keywords. Now, how do you find keywords? It's a keyword tool. You can use Google AdWords Keyword Planner. It's a free tool. You can type in, you'll need to sign up to obviously a Google account. You need to sign up and search for any keyword terms. So again, it could be, pubs on the Isle of Wight, or it could be restaurants in Ryde as a keyword. So making sure you do your research properly, and you assign them to a page. So you don't want to use the same keywords on all pages, otherwise you may end up cannibalising what you're doing. So when we talk about cannibalising, you're essentially pitting pages against each other because you're using the same keywords, so make it unique. Okay? You want to populate your body copy. Those keywords, don't use any more than 4, 400 word, 300 word page copy. Metadata, so I spoke about metadata, making sure that's filled out. Your H1 and your H2, so your headings, so your biggest heading, try and use a keyword where possible. It's not always possible, but try if you can. And header 2, so it could be like a subtitle. So you could be talking about restaurants in Ryde, it could be the, you could be the H1, the H2 could be great family restaurants for you to try, or something like that. So you're kind of breaking those up with different types of keywords. And your alt tags as well. So when you use an image, so whenever you add an image to a web page, making sure that you've completed the alt tag. So it's essentially telling Google, so if I was to look at a web page, I can quite clearly see that there's an image. It could be an image of a dog, and I know that's a dog, but Google won't know that because Google can't see like us humans. So it's essentially code. And an alt tag tells, the alt tag tells Google what it is, essentially.
Does it also help if somebody's blind?
Yeah, and there's also if they've got disabilities as well, and you can often expand that as well outside of alt tags to include other copy in the code, like transcribing. There's more. Alt tags will often have its own field in a CMS that you use. You just have to open up the source code or the code of the page to do that. Check the URL structure. So you don't want to make your page URL structure ridiculously long. Google will read that as essentially how the page flows. So you'll have your main domain, so that could be number 64 Ryde. Then the next part of the URL structure could be book a table. And the next one after that could be contact number or something like that. So make sure when you look at the URL structure that it, one, makes logical sense, and two, try and use a keyword if you can. It's not the end of the world if you can't, but you don't want it to be so long that it falls off the edge of Google. Okay. Internal and external linking, so making sure that perhaps if you've written an article about a service you provide, you're clearly linking back to your service, otherwise there's probably no point in writing the article in the first place. And external linking sources as well. So I gave the example of where I used to work. If, say, we were a distributor, we sold other people's products, so I would often link to a manual on that own product owner's website. So it's just about, and also giving value to the user, which is also really important. Great resources, so SEO Mofo, which is essentially a character check. So you can go on there, you can write out the meta descriptions. It's quite old, but it's like #1 on Google, and it works really well. I've used it for a number of years, and if you write too many characters, it will cut it off, and you can see that before adding it to your meta description. And if you use WordPress, I think there's also a Joomla add-on as well. Use Yoast SEO as the plugin. It's essentially a free version. You can upgrade to a premium version as well, but obviously that costs money.
Is it much cost? Do you know?
I think it's about £13 a month, and you can add more than one keyword into that as well.
One keyword only.
We use it, and it's brilliant. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and it will tell you exactly, you know, what you haven't done. It will give you an amber, green, or red
Suggestion.
I like that.
which is good.
I can understand that.
The next one is user experience. So this one is be the user. So if you're on a website and it's completely ridiculous to navigate, your user experience is probably not great. Now I use the example of Amazon. You know, no website is absolutely perfect, but the way that they've navigated their menus, they put a lot of work into how pages look and feel. And you've got to also think about mobile versus desktop as well, so how those pages look and operate. So be the user, have a think around how that works. So does your website offer what users expect? You know, can I buy something on your website? Can I contact you? Making sure all your information is accessible to the user is what they're looking for. Because at the end of the day, we're looking for them to convert, some form of conversion. How will they convert? So will it be a sign up to a contact form? Will it be a phone number? Will it be to download something? Will it be to buy something? So making sure that you've identified that as part of the user experience, making sure it's as easy as possible. Steps to test. So most users, an industry average, will take 3 steps towards an action. So they might come in on the home page, and from the home page, that's 1 step. Within 2 steps, an industry average say they would often need to convert. Anything longer than that, and they begin to drop off. So obviously, it's not industry specific, but I would say within 3 steps, everyone understand what I mean, kind of steps, like 3 pages essentially, you would have wanted to make sure that there's a conversion or giving them enough incentive to go on. So there's a really good software, some of you might have heard of it, called Hotjar. It's essentially heat mapping software. So it will give you, you'll have to sign up, it's a free month, you'll probably have to add your credit card details, but it's worth doing. And it's essentially give you a temperature map of your website. So you have to embed a bit of code onto the header of your site, and it will allow you to see how users in real time interact, but it will also give you heat maps. So it will tell you, like, red will be, you know, the hottest, certain button areas, and the blue will be the least area they react in. Again, I'll link to this and send you these afterwards. It's worth looking at and considering. It might not work for your business, but it's essentially what that's telling you is there could be, for example, your top menu, your top navigation, they might be pressing a button at the very end of it. So what might be worth doing is moving that button down to the beginning, so you've got your home, and then you might find that, you know, web design, if you had web design at the end, people are mostly clicking on that. Perhaps it's better for the user to move that down to home and web page. So that's essentially what the software does. I think it's really good, and you get a much free as well. Content is still king. Jackie mentioned content. That hasn't changed. There's a long form content now is becoming, BBC are using long reads now. It's becoming more prevalent, use of video. The types of content being used is essentially giving users all types of content to digest. Make sure it adds value to the user experience. Don't write, try not to write a salesy blog post. I know obviously that's what we want people to do. But try and, you know, tell them about the, you know, the solution to the problem when they buy your product, for example. Or perhaps you want to tell them, you know, you've recently, I know Lewis does it for Wheeler Solicitors. You know, they do a lot of charity work, and so it's what I would call a good news story. You know, so telling people about what you're doing as a business and making sure it adds value to the user is really important. Give people a reason to convert as well, so it's the value proposition. Video, webinars, white papers are all really good forms of content, and these are no-brainers, but perhaps sometimes you might forget these types of content exist. is there demand and interest for this type of content? So, you know, for example, do white papers work for you? Some of it might not, some of you it might. You know, making sure that what you're creating works for your audience. You know, at the beginning we talked about knowing your audience is also really important. There's a really great resource, again I'll link to it, it's called Google Trends. So it essentially takes data year to year of search trends, it's Google Trends, but it will give you ideas in terms of the types of content you could write. So it's again a free tool, and also Google Keyword Planner will tell you the search volume. So it's no good perhaps writing you're including keywords, it's got 10 in terms of search volume, but actually this other keyword might have 3,000. So it's basically knowing what to use. Loading times. How are we doing for time? I'm kind of I'll just get rid of it. So cut to 2 seconds if you can, possibly do that. It can be quite difficult. One of the root causes. Sorry?
Speed of what? Sorry.
Speed of your website loading.
Oh, right.
So if you're going onto a website and your website's taking a while to load, then you really need that to be quicker. It's a big turn off for many users. I'm currently doing a bit of work around my own website at the moment, because on mobile it's a lot slower than on desktop. So I'm looking at kind of refining the images that I've used, kind of looking at new templates as well. So it's worth looking at that. It increases page abandonment. So essentially, if you've got these big images that are like 4 megabyte and your server is loading that image up, it's going to take a long time to do. I would often say 200 kilobytes is a good size, not in all instances, but you don't, obviously, it's that fine line, isn't it? You're trying to juggle the speed of your website versus the quality of your content. So you might actually find that 400 kilobytes is better, but you don't want it to be anything more than a megabyte. I think we're getting into Sillyville there. But using Photoshop is...
Does it depend on the user's broadband speed though?
It would depend on the server you're hosting you're with. So one of the other points I talk about is cheap hosting. So obviously we want to probably spend the least amount of money possible on hosting, because our costs and overheads are maybe quite expensive, or you're trying to cut back on costs. Make sure you do your research with hosting, because often it would be the time it takes for your website to load from the host could actually be what's impacting site speed. So making sure you do your research, whether it's cloud or server side as well. So there's clear differences between the two. It's worth doing your research, shopping around. Great resource. If you want to know the speed of your website and how long it loads, is Google Page Speed Insights. It's a really good free tool again from Google, and it will break it down into mobile and desktop as well, if you want to know that. Cool. Visualize data is the next one. Google Analytics. Has everyone got Google Analytics set up? Does anyone use Google Analytics? Do we know what Google Analytics is? Okay, so it's essentially a free Google product that allows you to view users in real time. It will allow you to look at page views, what they're viewing. It's a really good bit of software, and all it takes is you to log in to Google Analytics, drop a bit of code, and Google Analytics will do the rest. Obviously you can go really in depth, but for what we want quick, easy, visible data. And one of those is a personalised dashboard. Obviously Google Analytics is required. What a dashboard does is essentially you go onto a website, or you can create your own ones, but there's many very good templates out there that you can download for free, and I'll include a few in the survey as well. You'll need to have a Google Analytics account first. You need to know what you need the dashboard for. So if your website is e-commerce, you're going to want to know how much you're generating, the types of pages they're viewing, etc. So the URLs I'm going to give you will break that down into e-commerce websites, into brochure websites. So if you just want a generic dashboard telling you page views, what it essentially, the dashboard is you'll log into your Google Analytics, and it will give you, at a glance, the data that you've chosen, or the links that I provided you with, there will be about 8 different dashboards to choose from. You might find none of them actually suit you, but there are plenty of websites out there that will offer you free downloadable dashboards. I'll give you the example of Lewis and Wheeler Solicitors. Can I talk about this?
Yeah.
Cool. So I came in and worked with Lewis and Wheeler Solicitors on their SEO for the day. And part of that was creating a dashboard that you could log into Google Analytics and you could look at the types of people, where they're looking. And I remember when we had that conversation, we kind of broke down where on the Isle of Wight people were looking, and we then kind of a wider conversation came out of that, where we could actually look at marketing in Cowes and in Newport and Wootton, and then we were thinking, oh, okay, well, there's major bus routes around there, and there's probably marketing opportunities in bus shelters. I don't know if you ever went for that, but I remember that kind of conversation that took place. So, yeah, dashboards are really useful at a glance, and they're free as well. HTTPS. I'm going to run through this because yeah. So does everyone know what HTTPS is? Yeah. So exactly, it's in the job. Exactly that. So websites, your domain or your server. So it's for hypertext, transcript, protocols, security.
Test yourself.
Exactly. And basically what that is it's telling Google that your website is secure. It's essentially whoever you host your domain with, there will be an option for you to select a free HTTPS certificate. Now since July 2018, Google released Chrome 68, which flagged non-HTTPS websites, so just HTTP, and that would display your website as not secure.
I've seen that come up lots of times.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's relatively easy to do. It's been used as a ranking signal since 2014 as a sign of trust. Insecure websites are a major turn-off for many consumers because it will essentially be blocking them from transacting on your website. You can use a basic Let's Encrypt certificate for free where appropriate. So this won't sit well with all businesses, depending on the level of. So if you've got quite a high level of e-commerce, the amount of data that flows through your website between the browser and your server, best speak to your web developers. The free version will work well for businesses who just require a shopfront on the website. Anything more complex, then you have to start paying for these, which become more expensive. I'll send you a really good resource that tells you more about them. You can read up on it, but it's essentially you're telling users that your website's secure, which is a no-brainer.
Does the free one come up with HTTP?
Yes. You'll need to do some. You'll need to do some readjusting on the back end of your server. You will tick the box, and then you're essentially adding the HTTPS part to the domain. But there's things server end that you'll need to get your server to point at. If you use WordPress, there's plugins that do this, and the same with Joomla as well. If you are lucky enough to have a web developer or someone who's competent in that, then obviously they'll be able to help as well.
If you've got an ordinary website, you need to add some code to it.
Add code. So it would depend on who you've hosted the URL with. That's where you would start first. So you would log into your cPanel. You go into your domain settings. There should be one setting which would say site security or security certificate. Click into that, and it should break down the one you have. Often your website will default to HTTP. I think website providers have started defaulting to HTTPS. But again, the resource I provide you will give you the answers to that. Right. Any more questions about HTTPS? Sorry, I know it's quite a whistle stop tour. Next bit, number 8, structured snippets. How are we doing for time? Where's the clock? Up there. Cool. This is basically, you know, on Google sometimes when you're looking for an ingredient or a recipe. So you want to find a recipe for a pasta dish. And at the very top of Google, you find there's this big box which provides content in, like it could be a list of ingredients, for example. Give you some examples. This one here, what is a metric unit for mass? So that was one. How to apply coconut oil to the face as well. So these are essentially structured snippets. And what this is telling Google is your content is worthy. Which I know sounds really harsh, because I'm sure all your content is really worthy, but in the eyes of Google, it might not be. So what essentially structured snippets does is it tells Google that your content is worthy, essentially. For this to work, you will need another Google product. I know there's quite a lot of Google products tonight, but here's another one to add to the list. I wish. It's Google Tag Manager. It can be, they've made it a lot easier in recent years. It used to be quite complicated. And you also need schema.org. So schema.org is a website that gives you the types of structured snippet that you could use. So it will break it down into a recipe, it will break it down into star ratings. So, you know, sometimes you might see stars up here on Google. It could be, there's lots of different options. There could be ones that aren't applicable to your business. There might be ones that are. So definitely check out schema.org. It's a good place to start. Once you've looked through the list of schema available to you, then obviously pick and choose what you want. Then head to Google Tag Manager, where you can start playing around. Obviously, you are opening your website up to playing with your code. So make sure you're taking backups of your website, or you have a backup in place to be able to start doing that. It takes time to appear. It won't appear overnight. It could take several months. It could take a year. But essentially what you're doing is you're telling Google that your content is in position 0, essentially. You're above everyone else. You know, on mobile, this is going to be absolutely huge. So you're essentially, a bit of work, you're essentially getting priority positioning for nothing. It also forms part of your wider content strategy. So make sure maybe if you're writing a blog post, you're thinking about perhaps the type of schema you're using as well. Okay. We're almost there. Top tip number 9. Subscribe to SEO blogs. This is a big one. If you're, obviously you might be like some businesses are very time sensitive. What's that? Oh, naughty. You might be time sensitive, so you might not have enough time, you might only devote 4 hours a week. So start subscribing to a few blogs. There's some really good ones. There's Moz. Has anyone heard of Moz before? It's a really good digital marketing blog. Has a fantastic beginner's guide to SEO as well. So if you're new to SEO, it's worth looking at. Search Engine Journal. So if you want to broaden your digital marketing out to PPC and content as well. It's more current affairsy, but will give you kind of perhaps a softer approach, won't be as technical. And then Search Engine Watch. So it's a very technical SEO blog. So you're starting getting into the code of your website and what to work. So I always recommend starting with Moz because it's a really nice website. It's where I'd say most digital marketers start. So they also offer courses and other services. Top tip 10. Test and fail. We hate talking about failure, don't we? No one likes losing or failing miserably, but it's all part of what digital marketing is. The great thing with digital marketing is it's generally fairly quick and you can be very reactive to what you do. So when you talk about test and fail, you might, with SEO, want to try different types of keywords that might not necessarily link to the product you offer. You might want to look at ways to reduce your bounce rate on your website. So when we talk about bounce rate, we're talking about people who come onto your website and then literally just jump off again. And you might want to think about ways to make people stay on your website. So you might think, well, I've been doing this type of content for quite a while. Maybe I need to mix things up a bit. So I'm going to do something which is a bit out there, might not be related, but it might get people to your website. So don't be scared to try new things. Digital allows us to be more creative. Obviously, you know, not all strategies will work, is the bottom line. Don't be scared. I've tried things in the past and they haven't worked. But hey, you learn from making mistakes. Don't be scared to fail as well. But the great thing is there's lots of free information on search engine optimization out there. And if you're subscribing to those blogs, then you're going to be knowing what to do and what not to do. The best places to look are Moz. There's also HubSpot as well, which is similar to Moz. It's more broader digital marketing as well. Any questions?
That's tip was you got number 9.
Sorry?
Go back one. It's a tip number 9.
Sorry, guys.
I am awake.
See, I tested and failed. I meant to do that. Didn't I?
Can I just ask my son's people?
Not necessarily.
White paper.
So when I took, no, it's fine. So
My silly question.
exactly, it's a silly question. So when we talk about a white paper, we talk about it's normally quite common in a business-to-business environment. So it won't be necessarily consumer, and it will be normally like a downloadable article that will tell the audience about a product or service. So think of it like an essay or like a downloadable PDF. White paper is like a more generic term for something like that.
Using it in a similar way to the government. Like,
That's one example.
Like proposals, draft plans.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, we're about to do one, aren't we, for Jackie,
Yes.
aren't we?
Yes.
So big heritage project that we worked on. There's quite a lot of activity over the last few years. We've collected essentially people's history, isn't it? In a way, it's a big database, and the company that we're working for would like to do a white paper on, isn't it?
Analogy, yeah.
Or a case study.
Case study, yeah.
So it's essentially a bit of communication that would work better in business environments, not necessarily consumer facing. Sorry, that was quite a long-winded answer. Any other questions? Did that make sense at some level? Sorry, I tried to pitch it and then try to increase the understanding. Any questions? Come to me or email me.
Thank you very much.
So what we'll do is there's
birthday.
exactly. So it's the first anniversary of the Skill Exchange. Actually, back in November. Actually, I lied. Back in November. So there is cake. We did one in November. So if you would like some, who doesn't like cake? And then obviously coffee and other refreshments whilst you network. Thank you. Cool.